The sun was just beginning to rise over the dense canopy of the Sundarbans, casting golden rays across the tangled wilderness. In that moment of stillness, a Bengal tiger stalked silently through the undergrowth, her muscles fluid beneath her striped fur. She was old enough to have scars and wise enough to avoid unnecessary conflict. She was hunting not just for hunger, but for instinct, a daily ritual in her unrelenting dance with survival. Thousands of miles away, in the misty peaks of Rwanda, a silverback gorilla surveyed his troop from a rocky outcrop. His eyes held a depth that suggested thought. Not mere reaction, but deliberation. He noticed patterns, sensed moods, protected the young. Though brute strength made him a fearsome opponent, his true power came from observation and patience. He was known as Kubo among those who studied him, though he had never known a name. And far above them, in an orbit just beyond Earth's grasp, something unnatural waited in silence. The first signs came in fragments: a sudden blackout over the Amazon, a stampede at Kruger Park with no clear cause, a dive of whales vanishing mid-song from the Pacific. Governments scrambled to investigate, but satellites revealed nothing. Not first. Then came the shimmering shapes, enormous structures cloaked in what could only be described as visual static, shifting like mirages, blinking in and out of visibility. When the ships finally appeared, they blotted out the stars. People named them the Shrouds, massive obsidian construct descending into Earth's most biodiverse regions. They didn't communicate. They didn't attack. They extracted. The tiger's territory was the first to fall. The forest bent beneath the force of the gravity manipulators. Ancient trees crushed without resistance. She fought, slashed, bit into glowing arms that came from nowhere. And she was taken. Not killed. Taken. Kubo watched the jungle open like a peeled fruit. The clouds above churned, the sky cracked open, and before he could rally his troop, his vision blurred, and the world fell away. He awoke in silence. Not darkness. Silence. He was inside something vast and humming, lit by harsh, cold lights and filled with the scent of fear. Within 72 hours, the planet's largest wild predators had been harvested. Lions from the Serengeti, wolves from Alaska, orcas from Antarctic waters, eagles, crocodiles, anacondas, bears. Every biome had been touched. The Shrouds never harmed a human. They simply ignored them, as if they were not the point. No official explanation was ever given. The global scientific community was left with speculation. That's when the transmissions began. They weren't messages in any known language, but they contained patterns, moving shapes that resembled DNA spirals, pulsating as though alive. Audio spectrographs of the signals resembled heartbeats. Biologists began to suspect the truth. The aliens weren't just collecting wildlife. They were cataloging, repurposing. Months passed. The Shrouds left Earth as suddenly as they came. All attempts at retaliation failed. Missiles passed through them like whispers. Satellites lost track of the crafts once they left the solar system. Some assumed Earth had been spared, that it was over. But for the creatures taken, it had only just begun. The tiger awoke again on cold, artificial soil that reeked of sterilization and metal. She was surrounded by strange trees, perfectly symmetrical and silent. A false jungle, its air too clean, its stillness too exact. Invisible barriers caged her in, but nothing visible held her back. Her instinct screamed that this was not Earth, that nothing here belonged. Across a glass chasm from her enclosure, another chamber stirred. Kubo sat crouched, eyes alert, body tense. The moment he saw her, their eyes met, not as prey and predator, but as prisoners. They weren't alone. Hundreds of similar enclosures stretched into the horizon of the vast alien facility. Some housed apex predators, others unfamiliar life forms, beasts with translucent hides, creatures of scaled crystal and coiled limbs. It was a zoo, but more than that, a test bed. The Zarnok, as they would later be called, had been watching Earth for centuries. Their society revered biological dominance. In their own history, war had been waged not with weapons, but with life forms engineered to outmatch each other. Evolution was a sport, and Earth, in its complexity, was the final frontier. But what the Zarnok didn't understand, what they never anticipated, was that true apex predators weren't defined by teeth or strength. They were defined by defiance. Back in their cages, the tiger and the gorilla adjusted. The tiger prowled endlessly, testing every inch of her invisible prison. Her mind worked ceaselessly, sharper now, honed not just by hunger, but by the unease of artificial silence. Kubo studied his surroundings too, but with different eyes. He observed the patterns of the machines that fed them, the drones that hovered with emotionless precision. He noticed the rhythm of the lights, the gaps in timing, the vibration in the walls before they came. Time passed differently here. Their bodies adjusted. They healed quickly. Their senses sharpened, perhaps even enhanced. The Zarnok didn't merely contain them. They modified them for entertainment. Eventually, the tiger was released into an arena, her first trial. A ring of synthetic jungle surrounded by observation towers. Her opponent was not another Earth creature, but something bred in vats of gel and wires. A sinewed beast with chitin armor and razor blade limbs. She didn't win with brute force. She won by outmaneuvering it, by using its bulk against it, luring it into a fall, tearing into its exposed joints. The Zarnok recorded everything. To them, it was data, spectacle. Kubo watched from his enclosure. He saw the tiger return, limping, bloody but unbroken. He roared, not in fear, but in solidarity. She turned to look at him through the barrier. In that brief moment, understanding passed between two species that had never shared a word. They were being used, manipulated, trained. For war, perhaps. For sport. But the Zarnok had made a grave miscalculation. They thought they were collecting specimens. What they had truly gathered were survivors. Somewhere deep in the labyrinth of the alien stronghold, gears shifted. Plans were made. A new trial was being prepared. One that would pit Earth's most formidable against one another. The Zarnok didn't realize they had already begun to lose control. And for the tiger and the gorilla, the games were over. The war was about to begin. The artificial sun never set in the Zarnok facility. It hung overhead like an unblinking eye, casting its sterile light across the sprawling compound. There was no night, no cycle, only the endless hum of machines and the silence of captivity. Kubo sat crouched in his enclosure, motionless except for the steady rise and fall of his chest. Across the divide, the tiger lay coiled in the corner of her chamber, tail twitching slowly, her golden eyes fixed on the ceiling as if trying to pierce the metal veil that kept them separated from the stars. They hadn't seen the sky in weeks or months. It was impossible to know. Time passed without rhythm here. Another drone passed overhead. Kubo didn't flinch. He had learned their routes, their timing. The machines never deviated. Predictable. That was their weakness. The tiger knew it too. She moved in sync with the drones now, slipping into shadow when they turned, pressing against the edges of her enclosure as if testing them, learning them. Then the floor trembled. A section of the facility retracted with a hiss of steam, revealing a corridor bathed in harsh violet light. Kubo rose alert. The tiger did too. Something had changed. The walls between them shimmered, grew translucent, and for the first time, they could see each other fully, without obstruction. She didn't growl. He didn't challenge. They simply watched. Moments later, the tiger's floor shifted beneath her. She crouched, growling low. A sudden drop launched her downward into darkness. She landed in a chamber larger than any she had seen, an arena, encircled by walls of glass and pulsing light. On the other side, a Zarnok creature stood behind a console, its elongated fingers dancing across holographic controls. Its face was unreadable, metallic and glistening, with eyes that moved independently like those of a chameleon. Around it, other Zarnok floated in observation pods, their tendrils draped lazily over the controls. The floor reshaped itself beneath the tiger. Metallic trees rose like skeletal limbs, and from a hatch in the ground, a new beast emerged, an amalgam of reptile and insect, long and coiled, its mandibles clicking with anticipation. It towered over her, built for destruction, its eyes dead and gleaming. The tiger didn't hesitate. She charged low, dodging the beast's first strike. She spun behind it, claws tearing at the joints between its armored plates. It shrieked, flailing, but she was faster, smarter. She'd fought for survival every day of her life. This thing was a construct, a weapon without instinct. That was its weakness. The battle lasted less than 2 minutes. The arena fell silent as the creature collapsed, twitching, ichor spraying from its wounds. The tiger stood over it, breathing hard, blood soaking her fur. She didn't roar in triumph. She simply turned and looked at the Zarnak observer, as if to say, "Is this all you have?" Back in his enclosure, Kubo had seen everything. The walls weren't just observation tools. They were projection surfaces. Every fight was recorded, analyzed, broadcast. He had watched many creatures fall, but the tiger had survived more than once. She was becoming something more than an animal, a symbol, and he could feel the shift within himself as well. Later, the Zarnak came for Kubo. His descent into the arena was slower, the light around him warmer, almost reverent. The Zarnak seemed curious about him, not for his strength, that had been proven, but for the way he watched, the way he waited. They underestimated thought. They expected rage. They received calculation. Kubo's opponent was not a beast, but a machine, bipedal, sleek, and bristling with energy weapons. It moved with artificial grace, programmed to kill. Kubo didn't charge. He waited, let fire, dodged. He took one hit to the shoulder, fell, rolled, then rose again. He noticed the recharge delay, the flicker in its left arm. He used it. With one powerful leap, he grabbed the machine's head and slammed it into the arena floor. Again, again, again. The glass cracked. Sparks erupted. The machine twitched and then lay still. The Zarnak didn't cheer. They never cheered, but their posture changed. Recordings doubled. Internal transmissions flickered across the ceiling. Notes were taken. They had an expected adaptation. As the days continued, the tiger and the gorilla were both tested, separately and sometimes observed together. Never allowed to interact directly, but often brought near each other's chambers, as if the Zarnak were studying the tension between apex predators from different worlds. What they didn't understand was that the tiger and Kubo were no longer acting alone. They were learning together. Small things at first, synchronizing their movements during feeding times, mimicking drone patterns to mask their actions. Watching, always watching. Then the pattern changed. One night, if it could be called that, the alarms flared. A containment breach in Sector 9. Kubo knew that sector. A polar bear had been housed there, restless, violent, incapable of containment. The Zarnak had tried to isolate it after it broke the arm of a guard drone. Now it had escaped, but the alarms didn't signal fear. They signaled excitement. It had been planned. The bear had been released into the tiger's arena. The tiger circled tense. The bear roared, foam at its mouth, eyes wild. But there was no fear in her, only calculation. She didn't attack. She stood her ground. The Zarnak watched eagerly. Perhaps this was their grand experiment. Apex versus apex. But something else happened. The tiger didn't strike. She bowed her head. The bear hesitated, and then, astonishingly, backed away. The tiger didn't chase. She turned to the observation wall and stared directly into the eyes of her captors. The bear followed. It was the first recorded refusal of combat. The Zarnak were furious. Alarms sounded again. Gas flooded the arena. Drones surged in. The tiger snarled, lunging, taking one down before the others struck her with pulses of energy. She fell. The bear fell. Both were dragged back to containment. Kubo roared in his enclosure, fists pounding the floor until cracks formed in the reinforced plating. The Zarnak observed this too. They thought it anger. They mistook it again. It was grief. Later, in the dim glow of the chamber, the tiger awoke with her side seared, her vision blurred. But she lived. They had spared her, not out of mercy, but curiosity. Something had changed. Earth's creatures were no longer behaving like beasts. They were organizing. The final test was coming. It was clear in the way the drones moved, faster, more agitated. The facility buzzed with a new kind of urgency. Enclosures were being emptied. Other predators were moved. The Zarnok had something planned. They had no idea how dangerous that would be. From opposite ends of the compound, the tiger and Kubo locked eyes again through the transparent partitions. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The time for waiting was over. The metallic groan of shifting walls echoed through the Zarnok facility, reverberating like the prelude to a storm. Lights flickered overhead, pulses of violet and red cascading across the glass enclosures as if the entire station were holding its breath. The final test had begun. Kubo's enclosure split open with a hiss. A corridor stretched before him, curved like the inside of a massive artery, throbbing with dim pulses of energy. He didn't hesitate. Every step he took was heavy with intent. The floor vibrated beneath his feet as if the station sensed his purpose. No drones greeted him this time. No restraints. No coaxing lasers. Only silence. Across the compound, the tiger was also released. Her wounds had scabbed over but still ached with every movement. She moved with practiced grace, low and silent, her body close to the floor. Her eyes, sharp as blades, missed nothing. Not the embedded cameras in the walls, not the faint scent of ozone from hidden machinery, not the rhythmic pattern of distant footsteps echoing through the structure. They weren't being freed. They were being unleashed. The two paths converged at the core of the Zarnok facility, a vast arena unlike any before, domed with reinforced glass and surrounded by tiers of observers. Hundreds of Zarnok floated in their crystalline pods above, their chitinous fingers twitching in anticipation, eyes glowing like dying stars. Below them, an artificial landscape shifted, reforming in real time. Terrain molded from memory, jungle, tundra, desert, all blending into a grotesque amalgamation of Earth's wild places. And from hidden alcoves emerged more creatures. Hyenas enhanced with exoskeletons. Snakes thicker than tree trunks, their scales laced with alloy. Raptors with artificial talons and luminous eyes. All stolen from Earth, experimented upon, turned into nightmares. Apex turned abomination. At the center of it all, the tiger and Kubo stood side by side for the first time. They did not look at each other. They didn't need to. Kubo pounded the ground once with his fists, a silent signal. The tiger responded with a low growl, tail curling with anticipation. This was not a test of survival anymore. It was a declaration, a statement carved in blood and bone. They were done playing by alien rules. The first wave came fast, pack hunters trying to flank them. The tiger leapt left, Kubo charged right. She struck with precision, her claws finding vulnerable spots where metal met flesh. One hyena screamed, crumpling. Another lunged for her throat, but Kubo's massive hand intercepted it midair, slamming it down hard enough to splinter its reinforced spine. They moved as if they had trained together for years. The Zarnok above began broadcasting signals, reconfiguring the battlefield. But the creatures didn't respond. A large silverback, twisted with synthetic implants, stood on the edge of the arena, trembling. Its red eyes flicked from Kubo to the fallen bodies. Then, slowly, it turned and charged, not at Kubo but at the Zarnok observation wall. Glass shattered. Panic rippled through the chamber. The implanted animals, conditioned for obedience, faltered. Some began attacking each other. Others dropped to the ground, confused, overwhelmed by years of pain and manipulation. The arena descended into chaos. But through it all, Kubo and the tiger remained a beacon of control, cutting through the madness with precision and fury. In the command chamber above, Zarnok officers barked orders in frequencies no human could hear. Energy fields activated, but Kubo dodged the pulse with inhuman reflexes. One stray bolt struck the tiger in the leg, causing her to stumble. A genetically modified bear seized the opportunity, roaring as it lunged. Kubo was there before it could strike. He grabbed the bear mid-charge and slammed his head into its throat, collapsing its windpipe with a brutal crunch. He stood over the tiger as she rose shakily, blood trickling from her flank. She nudged his side with her head, barely a touch, but filled with mutual acknowledgement. They would finish this together. A voice, deep and synthetic, echoed across the arena. It was the overseer, the architect of the entire project. His form descended slowly in a large, hovering pod, taller than the others, draped in cybernetic robes. His many arms extended outward, manipulating a swarm of drones that coalesced into a single massive form, a hybrid of machine and creature stitched from Earth's top predators, bound with cables and circuits. It stood on 4 legs, but had 6 arms. Its head resembled a lion, but the eyes were insectal. Wings emerged from its back, tattered, buzzing, and far too large for its frame. It opened its mouth and roared, a digital scream that distorted the air itself. The final opponent. The arena went still. Every Zarnok observed in silence. This was their masterpiece, the culmination of decades of abduction, experimentation, and violence. If this failed, their entire operation would unravel. The monster charged. Kubo braced himself, caught one of its arms, and was flung backward with a crash that dented the metal wall. The tiger leapt onto its back, claws finding purchase between armor plates. It howled, bucking wildly. She held on, biting at exposed wiring. Kubo returned, leaping high, catching the creature's wing in both arms and tearing it free with a thunderous rip. The creature shrieked. Lasers fired from its mouth, one of them grazing the tiger's side. She fell with a yelp. Kubo roared louder than he ever had, the sound echoing like a war drum. He charged again, low, fast, primal. He struck the monster's legs, cracking them beneath his weight. The beast fell forward. The tiger rose, bloody but alive, and leapt straight for the monster's exposed core. Her claws dug deep into the pulsating energy node at its center. Sparks flew, metal ruptured, and with a final growl, she tore it free. The creature spasmed, then collapsed in a heap of sparks, wires, and blood. Silence fell. The Zarnok stared, stunned. Their champion was dead. Their arena was wreckage. Their subjects, once trophies, had become rebels. And then Kubo stepped forward toward the main observation wall. He picked up a broken chunk of the hybrid's core, still glowing faintly, and hurled it with all his strength. The wall shattered. Zarnok pods began to retreat, alarms blaring. The facility had lost containment. Across the compound, other enclosures began opening. Creatures poured out, wolves, bears, panthers, eagles, elephants, all augmented in some way, all marked by the trauma of experimentation, and all looking for something, revenge, freedom meaning. Kubo and the tiger led the charge. They didn't know what lay beyond the facility, space, void, or another prison. But they moved forward, together, the embodiment of Earth's fury given shape. Behind them followed the rest, like an army of the wild, no longer divided by species, instinct, or fear. For the first time since their abduction, the creatures of Earth weren't prey. They were coming home.